Good evening, everyone. I am Sue Hodgen, and I am calling the September regular meeting of the Southport Planning Board to order at 6 o'clock. I ask that everyone please silence or turn off your cell phones, and we will start as usual by standing, those who can and will. And Scott Jones will do our invocation, and we'll follow with our allegiance.
Dear Heavenly Father, be with us tonight as we come to do the business of the city. Give us the wisdom to make right decisions for everybody, to do what's right for the Southport. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I'll note for the record that member Donnie Joyner is absent this evening, and we were to have member Keith Lachlan coming in, remoting in tonight, but so far he's not signed in. We'll give him a few more minutes before we note that for the record as well. Kevin, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Thank you. We do have a quorum to conduct business, so we'll continue with our agenda. Item D on your agenda is approval of the minutes. Members were issued the minutes of the August 17 meeting in advance. Are there any changes or corrections? Motion to approve those minutes as prepared?
So moved.
Thank you, Will. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dick. Motion is on the floor. Any final discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item E is the approval of our agenda for this evening. You were also issued that agenda in advance. Are there any additions or corrections? Do I hear a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Will. And a second? Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. There's a motion on the floor. Any final discussion there? All in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Item F is public comment. Do I hear a motion to move into the public comment period?
So moved.
Thank you, Will. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dick. Motion is on the floor. Any final discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion also passes unanimously. Thank you. Madam Deputy Clerk?
I do not have anyone signed up for public comment.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone here tonight that did not sign up but wishes to address the board? We're not popular again this month. Okay. Thank you. It has been noted to me that we need to vote Chris Jones in tonight in Donnie's absence as a voting member. Do I hear a motion to do so?
So moved.
Thank you, Will. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion is on the floor. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Chris, you can speak and vote tonight. Thank you. Okay. Do we have a motion to end public comment officially? I'm sorry. Did we get those notations in?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion is on the floor again. Any final discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you so much. G, item G on your agenda is old business. We have no items of old business. Moving on to item H, new business. One item is brought tonight, a proposed text amendment for UDO section 3.9, setback exceptions and encroachments. Mo, will you provide the staff report on this for us, ma'am?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Tonight, we have, as you mentioned, a text amendment to section 3.9, specifically 3.9.5B, or B5, I apologize. This is a text amendment that is brought forth by Cameron Smith, the applicant, and he is specifically requesting to amend this section of the setback exceptions and encroachments to modify the maximum setback encroachment for heating and air conditioning units, generators, pool equipment, and other similar items. Before I get too far, I just want to remind you this is a legislation process. So the planning board will provide a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen, who will then hold a public hearing, and then it will be formally adopted by the Board of Aldermen. So to give you a little history and background of this section of the UDO, Unified Development Ordinance, previously the exceptions for the setback did not include air conditioning units or any other equipment similar to that, or mechanical units within it. It was added in the newest revision of the UDO that happened and was adopted in September of 2020. So since 2022, that has now been part of the UDO, or it's been part of the UDO that requires the 30-inch maximum setback. And staff has been enforcing this standard since October. We don't know if historically since 2020, I can't find that there's any enforcement of this standard. It can be confirmed. So I would say that the proposed change, as we have mentioned, is changing sills, cornices, buttresses, ornamental features, gutters, eaves, and similar items may project into a required setback not more than 30 inches. And adding a new section, HVAC units, generators, pool equipment, and similar items may project not more than 48 inches into a required setback. The applicant has provided two examples to show how that they are different, or how the changes that would do. So if you look at the example here on the right, historically this is where the air conditioning and generators and other equipment would be allowed. And then if you look to the left, this is where they're having to move them because they're not able to put them into the setbacks because the homes are being built setback to setback on these smaller lots that we have. So this would be beneficial for flexibility in smaller lots. We have R10 lots throughout the city that have smaller lot widths, even to 33 feet, and then there are some planned unit developments that have smaller lot sizes as well that would be able to accommodate this provision if there was the change. Staff has also did some research. I spoke with Wes McLeod from the Cape Fear Council of Governments, who works with local governments within our region, working with their UDOs, and he said that many of the local and regional jurisdictions also have this 30-inch maximum setback, no further than 30 inches. I did some other research just throughout the state just to see what other communities do. I did find that some of them allow either the 30-inch encroachment or 50% of the setback, whichever is greater. There was also some that just allowed the encroachment for stoops for air conditioning. So as long as it was the smallest available stoop for your air conditioner, you can add it regardless of the setback itself. And then I did find a couple of other examples with a 48-inch setback for the equipment such that is being proposed here. That is really kind of an overview of what is being proposed. I would be happy to answer any questions, and Cameron Smith is here this evening, and I would invite him up to offer any comments as well. So,
Mr. Smith, did you want to make comments?
come up to the microphone, please.
Yeah.
I'd really like to maybe field questions. I mean, I did a description. I feel like I, gave a good rationale behind what I'm trying to do with a couple of examples, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I can tell you that, over the 20 plus years I've been building houses in this town, and I built a fair amount of houses, probably 75% of them would not have met this 30-inch requirement for, HVAC generator equipment. It's always been, we've always looked at cantilevers and things that are structurally attached to the house, but never really HVAC equipment and generators. And HVAC equipment and generators are fairly large, and HVAC equipment have gotten bigger since the new the new changes this past year. So, those units typically are about 48 inches off the structure, and we're just finding it difficult to overcome that with a lot of these neighborhoods.
What comments or questions does the board have?
So I have some comments, but they're more directed towards Mo. So Mo, in your survey of similar allowances in North Carolina for use of the setbacks, are any of those non-conforming lots? Or is that just general?
That was just general exceptions that were within their UDO. It didn't specify whether it was for non-conforming lots or not.
So based on my experience with non-conforming lots in Southport, there are houses that there's zero setback, and and there may be a house there's no setback whatsoever from the side, and with the UDO, I believe as it's currently written, you can tear that down and rebuild on the same footprint. So obviously no equipment can be fit with the zero setback, but if there's 4-foot setbacks, how is somebody going to have equipment and then be able to get past it for either maintenance or safety, such as fire department?
I did speak with the fire marshal, and he did not have any, he didn't have any issues with having these types of equipment within the setback at the different 30 to 48 differences. So I did speak with the fire marshal about that.
So if house A and B next to each other, they both have 4-foot setbacks. They're both non-conforming lots. They both have 4-foot equipment sitting in there, and they happen to be at the same location because it made sense to put it there on the property line. So that pretty much creates a wall for anybody to be able to get down the side in an emergency. It also looks to me like it would be a disadvantage for noise. If my house was on a zero setback, and then there's the house adjacent to me is with 4 feet, well, that equipment's going to be right against my house. And today's equipment, HVAC systems are generally quieter, but generators are not. And so I think it would be a disservice to allow that kind of equipment that close to somebody else's house. Not to mention safety concerns, because if the common side of the house was on fire and there's all this equipment there, what are you going to do?
I agree. I don't disagree with that statement.
So it doesn't make sense to make those changes for those reasons. One, out of courtesy for your neighbors. I know when a generator goes off after a storm, you can hear it a block away. And if that's right next to my house or anybody else's house, that's not going to go over too well. But I know more and more people have generators, but locating them at the rear of the house or in, as Cam calls it, the recreational area. I mean, if you're going to build on a 33-foot wide lot, I mean, that's just part of it. It's not ideal. And I know a house 25 feet wide is pretty narrow, but it doesn't make sense to me to be able to allow that kind of equipment in that small of a setback. If the setbacks were 8 feet, this might make sense, but that's not what we're talking about.
I got one question. On the proposed text amendment, you list some different situations, but in the rationale behind it, you've used the word such as cantilevers. Now, I don't, the staff came up with this page 11, is that right?
You're talking about the rash,
I apologize, I don't have the page numbers on my.
Okay, anyway, it shows what the current ordinance is, and then the proposed text amendment. And then it has some examples such as cantilevers. I would like to make sure the cantilever we're talking about isn't like the second floor sticking out another foot or something like that.
Well, what I'm proposing has nothing to do with cantilevers. Cantilevers are already, they're allowed up to 30 inches into the setback, and I'm not asking to change that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure.
It does.
It's not in what was proposed.
I was just saying that, I was just making a point in my rationale that those are the things historically that have been, that have been governed, were cantilevers going into the setback 30 inches, never the equipment. And, I understand, Fred, a little bit what you're saying, but on the flip side, I mean, you've got these narrow lots, people aren't going to put the equipment in front of the house. Who wants a bunch of equipment sitting in their only living outdoor, spaces that they have? I mean, that's a hardship. A generator comes on for a storm, and that's all over town. You put up with that for a couple of days, and you move on. It's whether the generator's behind the house or next to the house, it's still going to be noisy. I mean, I just don't see, and your point about the 4-foot setback, I mean, a lot of the neighborhoods I'm building in, 5, 6, 8-foot setbacks, even the ones with 10-foot setbacks, this can be an issue because you still can't go more than 30 inches in the setback. So if you're using your setbacks, and you still can't put your equipment on the sides of the house, even if you have a 10-foot setback. So it affects everyone. It's not just the tight 33-foot wide lots. It's everything. And it just, to me, it's a hardship for the property owner, and doesn't make sense. And I've spoken to the building inspector about it, and we've had long conversations about it, and he agrees. He thinks it's a problem too. And anyway, that's.
Well, I agree with the noise part of it. The generator, the units, HVAC, make a little noise, but they are what they are. They don't make that much noise. The generator is the issue. But, it's when there's a storm, everybody's power's out. You just have to live with what you have to live with.
Everybody's generator's going.
I hear my neighbors running, and it's a block away.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a shame for people not to be able to have a generator if they really want it or need it because of this rule. And in some cases, structurally and the way the mechanicals are in the house, you just can't have the generator behind the house. It may not work. It may not be close enough to the power source. I mean, it just may not work, period. So, I mean, it's,
So Cam, are you, I'm sorry, Scott, were you through? I'm sorry. So are you seeing issues when, you said this has been allowed in the past and talked about this has been going on for some time, apparently, where it's been, where they've been installed further out.
Yeah.
So are these things that you've reported as far as inspections go, or obviously you've noted them? Has anybody turned this in to enforcement for the city? I mean, is this something, I guess what I'm getting to is this a problem with staff not doing inspections as they should and reporting these things?
No, I think it's a fairly new ordinance. I think, as Mo pointed out, it's only been in effect for a couple of years, and it's just been now enforced by new staff. It wasn't enforced previously. I didn't even know it existed. So it hasn't been enforced, and I think it slid in when the new UDO was adopted. And I'm not sure that there was much thought put into it, but it just got, plopped in there. And I was surprised to hear that it was in the UDO. It was the first for me. But no, and all the houses that I've built and with HVAC and generators on the sides of the houses, which 95% of them, that's where they are. I've never really seen any issues where you've got units sitting up against each other. I mean, typically you're going to have a house that's built before another house, and you have a little bit of wiggle room on the sides of the houses. You're not going to jam your HVAC right up next to the neighbors. You're just not going to do that. And I haven't had any of those issues on any of my houses. People jockey their equipment around so that it works on the sides. You can get by them, and you can make it work.
So I guess I've written some things down here that may be questions, so just bear with me if they are. But why are, and I don't mean to pick on you, but you're standing here. Why are builders not developing smaller home plans in their portfolios for PUDs? I mean, this is what you've presented. Those are PUD lots, the square footage. That's a PUD, not an R10. So why are builders and developers a developer looking at a plat of land to develop, and they want to do a PUD, okay? Why not sacrifice a couple lots to make the lots big enough to accommodate? I mean, what's the rationale for folks coming in to build their home to take up every piece of dirt on the lot, and all of a sudden they're stuck with what they can't fit in? So a builder finds themselves fudging like this, or coming and asking, can we go further into the setback areas, because we just can't make it work. No offense, but you can make it work if there's a way to be able to talk with your buyer to say, by ordinance in the town right now, we just can't get everything that we're going to need here to fit, to stay inside the ordinance. So, and these are just questions, food for thought here, and for everybody else to think about this, I guess. So I know a developer thinks of, and we've heard this term before, maximizing profit, but so could we not reduce the number of lots down to accommodate that equipment? And I'm just thinking that might be an easy fix, and maybe even saving a few trees and giving some elbow and maintenance room between the homes. I mean, I'm like Fred, if you've got houses right up, to the very edge, and you got equipment between, and you've got to get in there for maintenance. I understand if you're in total control of the development, you're building everything out in that development, you would see to that. But if you were building somewhere where it wasn't, you weren't in total control, somebody else might not have that consideration with that buyer.
Well, these neighborhoods that I'm building in are not new neighborhoods that are coming, or neighborhoods that I've developed. They're just infill lots through the whole city. I mean, every neighborhood I can think of is I build it. I build in all of them. So, I see what you're saying, make the lots bigger, great. But that's not what we're dealing with here. We've got all these lots that are already platted in the city, and that's where the issue is right now. And in answer to your question, sure, you can just make the house narrower. But to me, You know,
I mean, I know
work
you
with-
don't wanna
I
do
work with
that,
client,
but-
well, it's not me, it's my client. I mean, I'll build whatever they want, but it's me saying, sorry, you know, we got to make your house 18 inches narrower. You already have a 40-foot wide lot or 50-foot wide lot. Just to be able to fit that HVAC unit on the side of your house, you got to make your house 18 inches narrower. And to me, it's not necessary to do that. You're creating, you know, maybe a little bit of a hardship in their living areas, and it's just not necessary. And that's why I'm proposing this, because it works being on the side of the house. It's worked the entire 24 years I've been building this town. It's worked fine, and it's different now, and that's why I'm here.
Anyone else?
Hey, Ken. This is a question, sort of a question as to this revision. Is it just for non-conforming lots? This is R10, all lot. Is that what I'm reading this?
This would, if
I
this
saw
change was
non-conforming.
made, it would be for any lot
So
in the
it'd be
city.
for any lots?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I don't want to bore anybody, but Southport is not the town it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and particularly Hurricane Hazel. These little lots, people built on them. They didn't, even the 33-foot lots, they didn't max them out. They didn't have air conditioning. So all these little lots worked a while back. But we're now having an influx of people who are being told when they come in here that they can max out the square footage of their houses into discussion. And that's what they do. They go to the realtor, they go to the builder, they go to everybody and say, we want to max out this square footage. And the city, in the few years I've been here, I've watched it from nobody pays any attention to this. Suddenly it becomes part of the UDO to not being enforced, to suddenly now it's trying to be enforced, but nobody has any record of it being enforced. It's sort of a mess. And this is part of our growing pains here in Southport. The lots that are left are the smaller ones. I mean, you can still buy a big one down here if you have enough money, but most of them are small lots, like you have to work in and everybody else is having to work in. I see the problem is that nobody's telling these people that they have setbacks for their equipment and everything else, and they can't have the maximum square footage that somebody told them they could have when they bought that lot. So I guess I'm sort of agreeing with you that it may be time for Southport and everybody to grow up and say, you can't build that little McMansion on that little tiny lot, but this is the biggest you can go because there are setbacks with HVAC and everything else. And I think everybody does it. And I'm amazed that you could actually come in here and say this because it needs to be said. It needs to be discussed. And I don't blame you. If I could add another 10% to the size of my lot, the house that I was building, that's what you're going to do. Realtors are going to tell somebody how big a house they can put on that lot. And I'm sorry, I'm sure there's realtors in here, but I don't necessarily agree with their mentality sometimes. And I guess the long story short is I've looked at this, I've looked at these lots. I worked in developments here in the county where multi-million-dollar houses were being built by multimillionaires who wanted to max out their square footage. And the developer came to look at him and said, you've got two choices. You can make your house smaller, and you're talking about somebody who wants to spend several $1 million on a house, or they even say, and I don't think it works here, but you have to build a setback in the footprint of the house and push all those things back because you are not allowed 1 inch of any setbacks. This is tough. This is real tough because what we have left in Southport are the smaller and smaller lots. And like you said, the non-conforming ones, dear God, you can tear it down as long as you leave the roof up or whatever and build it right back. And it's a nightmare for your neighbors now because of all the equipment and everything that has to be put there, that didn't have to be put there 80, 90 years ago. I don't know where I'm going for this, but I see where Cam is coming from, but at the same time, I'm seeing that this is something that it's not just a few houses, not a few non-conforming lots. This is every PUD and planned residential development that's coming along, and we're going to be getting a lot of them in the future, and we're trying to adjust old footprints with new technology that everybody wants. Yeah, I want a generator. I want my 2 or 3 HVAC systems out there. And if it has to be outside the footprint of the house and outside the setback, well, if I can get it done, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So the city's got to decide, is this valid for probably most of the houses and lots in the future here? That's all. I'm not saying yay or no. I'm just saying this is something's needed, and I don't know totally what the answer is. I wish I was smarter, but that's where I am. That's all I need to say. Thank you.
So this would make perfectly good sense on a conforming R10 lot, but it doesn't make sense on non-conforming lots or PUDs.
Is it mainly the 4 foot and less setbacks that you're having a problem with? So a typical
Sure.
city 8-foot setback would be, because that's a lot of what I build on and deal with is 8-foot setbacks.
Right.
Some 6 in the PUDs, but
That would make more sense on an 8-foot setback to do what you're talking about. So an average unit size is probably, what, 36 inches?
the size of the units now, they end up being 48 inches off the house because of it has to be off the house a certain distance, and then you got the size of the unit, so.
So
It ends up being-
if there's a 4-foot setback and you have a 36-inch unit, and you're supposed to have 12 inches of space off the house, that makes it a 36-inch one right on the line. And I would imagine code would require a certain distance to be able to service that unit, just like an electrical panel. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So the numbers don't make sense.
Well, it wouldn't be 30. It would be 48 inches from the line with an 8-foot setback.
Well, no, I'm talking about a non-conforming lot with 4-foot setback on the side. If you have 12 inches for the equipment to be off of the house and the equipment's 36 inches, you're right on the edge of the property line right there.
Well, I think from what I'm hearing Cam saying, he's addressing, mostly concerned with the ones with 8 and 10-foot setbacks. Historically, setbacks have been for the footprint of the house, and you build your house within that setback, and then the units encroach into, equipment encroaches into the setback. Now, I can't say I've had to deal with it in the historic district with a build to the line or build to a 4-foot setback, but when you get outside of the 100 lots, you're looking at 8-foot setbacks. And so now you're going to lose 4 foot of your building space if you don't allow them in the setback. That's a hardship.
Well, that part makes perfectly good sense, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about all the lots in Southport.
We can't put that hardship on lots that have the proper setback because there's a number of them that don't.
But in the UDO, there's remedy for those that might need to get exception for their size lots. We have that process in there for them to get remedy for that. I don't believe that we should undo setback requirements that should work well just because some folks have gotten away with it over time. So we should let everybody else too. To me, it sounds more reasonable to have conversation first with the manager and staff about the violations, and then this board look into what changes need to be made in 4.15E dimensional standards and 3.9 dimensional requirements for setbacks and the exceptions and encroachments to see what improvements can be made to clarify all these situations that we've been talking about. Like I'd say for example, I noted 4.15E number 1 is about PUD. Number 5 makes it read very confusing. And again, Cam, not at you, but we've seen in the past that we can't always count on the goodwill of developers. So the UDO has to be what drives the right thing being done. So for me, I want to get clarification from Mo. Tell me the time frame again for the text amendments, the requests that come in.
The planning board has 90 days from the day that it is presented, the information is presented to you to make a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen.
So 90 days, it would be
From
90
today,
days from
starting
today
today.
when it comes before us, right?
Correct.
Okay. And I'm hearing from several members that this is something that we need to look at more to make sure we get it right for everybody. Try to wrap all the circumstances in and make this right. Is that what I'm hearing? Yes, I'm seeing head shake. Okay. So what I'd suggest or I'd ask, I'd recommend now that we not take action on this amendment tonight. I'd like to see it set aside and the board come back in October when we've all had time to look through the UDO, these sections, and come back with suggestions or other questions for staff, and what we need to do to pursue appropriate text revision in all of those areas that we've talked about tonight. So do I hear a motion to set aside this submitted text amendment for further review of appropriate associated actions of the UDO?
So moved.
Thank you, appreciate that. Fred, and a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Will. Is a motion on the floor. Any final discussion? Absolutely.
This is a question on my part again. I know that we have a lot of 33-foot lots in this town. R10 says a minimum of 10,000 square feet, and I'm looking at both of you. How many square feet are normally in these 33-foot lots?
It really varies on the depth.
Yeah.
So they are less than 10,000 square feet, but some of them are 8,800, 9,000. I mean, so it's not that they are but some of them are closer to 6,000 square feet. It really just depends on the depth of the
So
lot.
these, in many ways, would they be considered non-conforming lots because it's a minimum of 10,000 square feet?
Yes, they are, and they are addressed in the UDO, and there
Yeah,
are,
that's-
yes, and so then there is a calculation for the reduction of your setback for those non-conforming lots is part of the UDO, because
Okay,
we're aware that those are existing and they are still buildable lots.
okay.
Yes,
All right, thank you.
you're welcome.
That's all I have.
Say one more thing, or? So one of the main objections I'm hearing is having equipment literally sitting too close to the setback for hazards and not being able to work on equipment and things like that. One thing that just popped in my mind in thinking about this is there could be a maximum or a distance not to, how am I trying to word this?
Encroach.
Encroach. So
But,
let's just say, for
yes, I know where
example,
you're going.
the equipment can be no closer than 2 feet to the property line. So you're allowed the 4 feet into the setback, but no closer than 2 feet to the property line. So on your, on your 6-foot setbacks and your 8-foot setbacks, that works. Your 4-foot setback doesn't work. And then you're not worried about your non-conforming lots anymore, because it wouldn't work in that scenario. But maybe that's something that could be added that would take the worry of having the equipment literally sitting out on the setback. Anyway, that's just a thought.
That was going to be my recommendation or idea, is that having the equipment so far back from the line, rather than talking about conforming, non-conforming, because those 6,000 square foot lots are all up and down Caswell, and there are lots of them. And I know, just coming down Caswell, I think between 12th and, or 11th and 10th exactly, I don't know, all those new ones that are in there, the HV units are all in the middle, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
In between the houses, and I think to Fred's point, can't really walk down between the houses, because those things are there. So
It's tough, because you're not going to ever see them in front, and your back areas are so, and on an alley with the garage in the back, so you got your garage in the back. So now you're like, where do you put it?
those houses, and I also think there should be a separation between the HVAC and the generators. I'm also with Fred, as I think putting a generator next to your house, if you have it, that's great, but your neighbor is definitely listening to it. And on those Caswell properties, I think more than half of them, the generators are actually behind the house, where the HVAC units are on the side. So I think those should also be parsed out, but there's so many 6,000 square foot lots all up and down Caswell. Those are the ones that I'm thinking of, but.
Any other comments, questions? We do have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. We'll work on getting some confirmation or some definition from staff, or getting some confirmation about the violations from staff, so we can have that at next month's meeting too, please, ma'am.
And I would like to say that I do want to reiterate that a lot of these lots aren't in violation. There was never, this portion was not part of the UDO for many years. So these air conditioning units were allowed to be in the setback because it was not specifically pulled out as part of the encroachment section.
And now, as well, in 2020, when the UDO was redone, there was prior language about cluster developments, is that right?
That's correct.
That was basically, for lack of a better term, dumped in to the revision. So where there may be some language in here that got too commingled between those two types.
Yes,
as
and we
the
can go back
revision.
and look through those.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's kind of where I'm going
Okay.
at too, that we may have some terminology in there, some text in there that may, an easy fix for it not to be confusing
Yes.
anymore, things like that. Okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Very good discussion, y'all. Thank you so much. We'll move on our agenda then to item I, other business. Mo, you're in a good spot to give us our update on the comprehensive plan revision.
Yes, this is just a quick update for you to know where we are with everything. There were 2 consultants that were interviewed last week by our panels. They both provided a brief presentation giving an outline on the consultant themselves, how they would be presenting the information with this to the city, how are they going to do public engagement, and then they were answered questions that were prepared by staff and the panels. We are currently following up with the references that they were given, so we are speaking with local governments who have used these consultants to see which one would be really the best fit for us, and also looking at the scores that were provided by the panels. So upon those reference checks, we'll be presenting a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen in October, or we're hoping to, yes.
So the references that were on these submissions, they're being checked now. That wasn't done prior to the
That
interviews?
was not done prior to, yes, correct.
Any other questions for Mo about the comp plan revision? Thank you, ma'am. Now, all of our agenda items complete. I'll ask if there's any additional comments or other business to be brought before the board tonight. Getting there. If not, any other business to be brought forward, we'll need to vote Chris back out as a voting member and back to alternate, his alternate position. Can I have a motion for that?
So moved.
And a second. Thank you, Roy. Motion is on the floor. Any other discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Chris, for tonight. We'll move to item J, announcements. Anyone have any announcements? Your members' attendance chart and roster continues to be at the back of your meeting packets. I will note, Tanya, if you will, sadly, I'll note that Travis should be removed from that staff listing on the roster. And now, with no other business, can I get a motion, please, to adjourn? So moved. Thank you, Will, and a second. Motion is on the floor. Any final discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I call us adjourned at 6:47. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Have a good night.